What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Compile Swift podcast. I'm your host, Peter Whittam. We have another very special guest today. This is going to be a great conversation. We're going to mention a lot of things. We're going to put a whole bunch of links in the show notes for you. Check them out. Absolutely check them out. I would like to introduce Ivan Novak. We have had some fascinating conversations, and I found Ivan by a post on dev.to. Shout out to them. Love that platform. And I just thought this is a conversation we need to have and get with the audience. So, hello, Ivan. Please introduce yourself.
Hey there. I'm a 17-year veteran of the software industry. I've run my own companies. I've existed inside of other companies. Currently, I'm principal engineer at a company called Online MedEd.
Very nice. Very nice. And I got to say, I read your post. This is going to sound kind of cliche, but it's true. As content creators and consumers, especially when we're developers and working in the technical industry, we consume a lot of media. And I was going through one day reading some Dev2 posts. I saw this post by Ivan called Passion Projects versus Paying Projects. And I don't know if it just hit me at the right moment as I was thinking about things, but I read through it and it just struck such a chord that I was like, okay, we have to talk about this, because I don't think I know anybody in the tech industry that at some point has not reached a situation where they say to themselves, okay, do I let what I love doing cross over into the area of what I need to do? So we're gonna touch on that along with a few other subjects. But let's start there, and I wanna sort of looking at my notes here, and I want to make sure that I get these quotes. I'm sort of paraphrasing, right? Because these are the lines that hit me, right? So we're builders. We build things. We play with the stuff we find that intrigues us, and every now and then we catch a spark. And I think we all know exactly where that's coming from. A glimmer of something bigger, something that ignites a fire that we just can't ignore, something that fuels our passion. Then the bills come in. and I read that and I was like, how did someone get my life in one paragraph of text? So let's talk about that. And again, listeners, viewers, we'll put links in the show notes. But let's dive into this and talk about this as a subject. How do you see this? And it's a great post, and it gives lots of I don't know if I should call it advice or just things to think about, because we all suffer this thing where you start taking something you love, and as soon as it becomes something that you almost have to do because it becomes your day job or your day project, something like that, over time this can become a problem, right? And you should never, in my opinion, never do something that takes something you love to a place where you end up sort of resenting it a bit. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I have a lot of experience with, right? So I got into coding in college, and as a way that I needed to earn some extra scratch, right? So I need to go out on a date or two, and I needed to earn some cash, and coding seemed like something to do. Like I'll just get into coding, and like for me, I was going to school for stats and math, and coding was a wonderful structured way to express creativity. So I found it to be a natural place to explore and enjoy myself, and happened to earn some cash while doing it. And I looked around, and my friends who had recently graduated with an econ degree were bragging about the cash and salary that they were making, and I was looking at the software industry as like, this is nowhere in the same realm, right? So software, we can do so much more. And so I went down that path and immediately went into the freelancing world, right? So I went from studying econ to freelance software. And for me, it immediately switched something that was an exploration of joy to a requirement. I needed to find that next client, or else I was sunk, right? So it turned into this paying project, what was a passion project for me. Fortunately, after years of scratch and just fighting tooth and nail, I found the joy again, and and I've been able to hang on to it since then. But yeah, I definitely am very much aware of the struggle.
Oh yeah, it's that line to me has always been a problem. Yeah, no, so I think you're right. This, every time I have turned a sort of a passion into essentially a career, at some point I have found I start questioning. Oh, do I want to keep doing this?
And was it the switch from self-directed exploration to external demands of specificity that really ruined it?
Yes, it is, and I know this sort of comes up in one of your blog posts on your site, and people should go check the links. But this is what happened. As you mentioned in one of your posts, the constraints started to come in, and the next thing you know is it's no longer, regardless of the subject. In this case, photography, but it applies to so many things, right? It's no longer your complete vision. It's now doing something that you love with skills that you love, but making a vision for somebody else. And then over time, that sort of creeps up on you. And the next thing you know is, okay, now I feel like I'm just a cog in the wheel using my skills legitimately, but not really using them to say what I want to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, and this is something that I discovered recently, it feels like that transition happens when it feels like there's a loss of control over yourself, over your own direction. Like you lose that authorship or being able to show up wholly for yourself.
Yep.
And as soon as you regain that direction, that sense of self control, even if you're in the same situation, it feels much better. So if you augment your W-2 with a side project or with a freelance gig or with a piece of consulting work or something like that, where you regain that control over your own destiny, even if nothing changes, but
Yep.
you cognitively switch perspectives, like you are your own author. And as long
Yep.
as you retain that sense of ownership, we can continue to feel great about showing up every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is something that I think we all go through it at some point. Most of us make it out the other side, right? Through one of two ways: either just perseverance, and you find a way to almost accept, okay, this is part of what I do, and I got two choices. I can accept it, keep going with it, or find a different path. And for me, and certainly folks that I've spoken with, that other path was these other outlets. And to say, all right, I got, put things in boxes here, right? There's the bit I do, I'm paid to do it. It might not be satisfying to the soul, but I've opened up these other avenues that when I close the office door, great. Now it's time to feed the soul, right? And to work on those side. I hate to call them side projects because I think a lot of it, as for creatives, is really it's just another thing you do, and almost it's almost a bit of an insult to it to put it into a box and somehow define it as a secondary thing, right?
Sure.
If we didn't do this, to us as creative folks, everything we do, I think, is has that level of the same level of passion to it, and to sort of categorize them in some ways is putting them in a priority list, and I think that subconsciously sort of chews away at you a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so there's that W-2 and then there's everything else. But that everything else is what lights the fire. And you have an opportunity to light the fire outside the W-2 and then fan the flames inside the W-2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, given that you are your own author, the author of your own career. You can choose to study whatever you want outside of work hours. And then at some point, you reach a critical mass of expertise or familiarity in that area, and you can choose a different W 2, right?
Yeah.
You can fan whatever flame you want and follow that where you choose to go. Because at the end of the day, as soon as you understand that you are your own author, the control is yours. Like you aren't subject to somebody else paying you. You can go choose your own method.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, I think, as you mentioned there, you are free to make these choices. And I think that it's very easy for folks sometimes to think that every choice you make has to somehow be tied to almost, it has to have a financial value to it. And, it shouldn't, kind of this perception these days that everything has to have some kind of financial payback as opposed to just, I like doing this.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
explore. And so for me, yes, I love the software stuff. I like doing my W-2. I like exploring through writing. I like building side projects. I like helping folks out with new and interesting challenges that they're experiencing. But
Hmm.
outside of that, like I enjoy building things. Like that's like fundamentally, that's what I enjoy about software. It's the building, it's the creation. And to that end, I can build physically. Like in the garage, I'm putting together an airplane. Like this is, I like doing that. I like creating what wasn't.
Yep. So that's interesting. Talk about this airplane. I'm curious now. You opened the door here. I got to
Yeah,
hear
you
about this.
feel free to walk through it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's the pathway for explanation. It makes a little bit more sense if I start back in high school.
Go for it.
So like from five, like any young kid, I played baseball for since I was 5 years old, all the way through high school, and that was my obsession. That was the first one. That was my first love, first obsession, and I ended up hurting myself. Like I ended up having two elbow surgeries to put it all back
Oh.
together, and like
Oh my
it
gosh.
was the end
Oh.
of my first love, right? And
Yeah.
so my parents did the best that they knew how to, was try to replace the passion with something else, and there, we did a lot of exploration. But the thing that caught my fire was flying, right?
Okay.
So fortunately for me, I was blessed with the opportunity to go flying as a hobby, and that turned out to be just a fascinating set of rules, and the different perspective that you have when you're flying around at low altitudes and in a little airplane getting bounced around by by the smallest of turbulence.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, man. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and after 17 years of doing high value work, it's really nice to be able to um, explore the opportunity to put one together. Like I'm building a Sling TSI. The airplane is manufactured in South Africa. It
Okay.
seats four,
All
and
right.
it's going to be a wonderful little project for me and my kids and my family to put together. It's probably going to take a couple of years to put together. Really, I think the build time is roughly 1,200 to 1,500 hours, and
Okay.
that's quite a few weekends and quite
Yeah.
a few
Yeah.
nights, and enjoying the time with the family. And just this past weekend, I had the first opportunity with my 5-year-old and my 16-year-old both helping me at the same time, putting
Nice.
the tail together, and it was really cool, man. Like to bridge that age range
Hmm.
on doing something that is meaningful to me. It brings the whole family together. I'm loving it. This is fantastic.
It does. It sounds fantastic, and I love, like you say, it's an opportunity for family and friends and whoever to come together on a project, and
Hmm.
and to have that time, And I'm sure inevitably, right, as you're working on this project, there's other benefits here, right? Not only that you're spending time together, you may be having conversations that you wouldn't necessarily find the time for at other times and things like that. And like you say, just this seeing this come together in front of you, right? And I think it's okay, and I'm not making assumptions here, but I think it's okay when you're doing something like this to stand back and sort of pat yourself on the back and go, I'm doing this. This is coming together because I'm making it, right? And I
Yeah.
don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know some folks sort of frown upon these sometimes, and it's like, well, you shouldn't feel so, you know, proud of yourself. But I think you should. And I think that's kind of the point is like, look, I wanted to do this thing. I'm doing it. I can see it happening in front of me. And, one day when it's finished, you go fly it, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, man. Like, so I should be done roughly in the same time period as my oldest goes off to college, and my
Fantastic.
youngest will grow up feeling like this is a normal thing, which is just wild. Um,
Absolutely.
and the really cool thing is that this like my philosophy on parenting is like you don't debase yourself to enable the kids. You have to show your kids that you're passionate so that they
Yep.
know what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
So I get to share something that I'm passionate about with my kids with no financial benefit or it pressures, right? It's just the thing that we're all enjoying doing together. And it
Yeah.
takes a long time to put it together. We see the little tiny bits of progress every day. And over time, that builds up into this really nice delayed gratification training.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Essentially saying, hey, whatever your dream is, more power to you. Go do it, right? And to not say, hey, you should really think about, picking something a little more obvious that everyone else does, because for me and the kind of person I am, that was the instant switch that said, okay, well, if everyone else does it, I'm not interested. I would rather do something different than fail than to just do what everyone else does because it's okay and it's kind of safe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely understand what you mean. And I see, and I'm struggling with that with my own kids as they're going through school. It's it feels like the schools are trying to make sure that it's catering to average. And there are so many more capabilities, there's so many more opportunities that can fan the flame of creativity or fan the flame of interest. It becomes that much more important for parents to see and pick up on those little things and interact with the kids so that we know enough about them to be able to create opportunities for them to learn and pursue their interests.
Oh yeah, and also to have that fun with it, right?
Yeah.
Like my software teams. Hopefully the first thing they would tell you, well, hopefully the first thing they would tell you is what a fantastic boss I am. But I'm not going to bank on that. I'm going to go with number two, which is that I try to make things fun, right? The stress of the day is always there, right? Especially when things are going wrong. So I have no problem being that guy in the room that's like, say something silly, right? Just to break it up, have some fun with it. They're used to it anyway with me, kind of that, letting in that English guy thing come through. We're all supposed to be a bit weird and quirky anyway. So it's great. I can play right into that. But to try and keep it fun and interesting and that,
Yeah. And
go on.
it seems like managing in a way that optimizes for joy also happens to optimize for throughput,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
if we can make sure that everybody is having a good time, that that the teammates that are gelling, that the projects are being managed at a decent cadence, that the direction is clear, and everybody is working on things that they enjoy working on. I mean, how can you get much better than that? It's such a nice way to manage rather than being dictatorial or being overly democratic. There's an optimization for joy.
This idea of, it doesn't end at 9 to 5, right? Just the same as any other creative outlet, anything like, your brain just doesn't switch off and that's it. Come back tomorrow, right?
Right.
It is. I know for me, and folks have said to me before, so I feel great that I'm not the only one and I'm not weird, that weird, which is sometimes either a solution or a really good idea comes to me when I'm just about to put my head on the pillow.
Oh
you
man,
know?
yeah, it's such a fascinating physiological like manifestation of how the brain works, right? So there's active focus and there's passive focus, and then you can throw it over to communication. That's why the rubber duck thing. That's one of the reasons why the rubber duck mechanism or method works, is because you're moving that problem around in different areas of the brain, and it unlocks additional processing power in different
Yeah.
areas. And if you learn to take the time to understand how to move the problems around inside your own head, it unlocks that much more power to think creatively. And you don't need to, I don't know, like take a pen and pencil or a pen and paper into the shower to think about something different in a different environment, or have a pad of paper next to your bed to capture that thought as it happens, just as you fall asleep. You can just
Yeah.
write it down. You don't have to do that. You can just kind of bounce it around in your head in different ways while you're sitting, just having lunch or whatever. Like you have control.
Yeah. And I think knowing that you have the control and the freedom to say, hey, this can happen to me anytime, right? And because I'm one of those people, my best time of day is late at night. If I could, and this sort of little bit goes back to, I think, the conditioning that I gave myself when I was doing the photography. There'd be long days. You'd often be working sometimes overnight on some projects. So I very much became a night thinker. And if I could, I'd work overnight, let the day go by, because I know the day, for the most part, is nothing but distractions for that inner me that's thinking through these problems without even realizing
Interesting.
it. And I think that's part of it too, is when I get to the end of the day, that subconscious switch that says, hey, stop looking at the calendar. The schedule's done. And it opens up that gateway that just lets all of this, like, it's been here all day. Great. Now it's coming out, But I'm glad that it does that. I'd be more worried if I didn't have that, because then I would realize, I really am just, this is what I do. It starts here, it ends there. And that would drive me crazy as a creative
Absolutely.
person.
Yeah. And it's fascinating that you've discovered that your ideal creative time happens to be in the evenings, right?
It
I
took
think that's
many years to accept.
right. I've noticed that uh, as you develop professionally and exist in a scheduled environment, let's say, um, different default proclivities for different kinds of thinking come to the forefront. For me, especially when I was freelancing and consulting in the first 5-10 years of my career, it became very obvious to me that my optimal productivity time was between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. And if I really needed to, I got another option, another door open to me right about 6 p.m. and I could work about to midnight. And I got
Interesting.
roughly maybe 80% as productivity or as productive during that block as in the morning. But when I did use that second block, I was fried for the next day or two. So
Interesting.
I could turn it on, but it's not something that I need to use all the time. I absolutely get fried if I do that many days in a row, as I'm sure anybody really would. But it's interesting to know how your body responds to different stresses.
So, do you find is this something where you consciously decide whether you're going to have that second session
Oh,
and
absolutely.
say no, not today, keep it till tomorrow, something like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's say, um, so most days I schedule my days so that I have that morning reserved. It's holy time for
Okay.
me. Don't talk to me. Don't even look at me. I'm productive in during this block of time. So, and then I go to lunch, and then I come back and I have meetings and chat and do whatever we need to do. But that morning time is holy. Don't touch. If we have like deadlines or a need to push, or I have extra work that I want to do or something like that, that I happen to need productivity for, I know not to do it during the early afternoon time because I'm not going to
Interesting.
be able to do it. The amount of
Okay.
horsepower changes for me throughout the day. And if I need extra thinking, I wait until the afternoon.
Very interesting. So you are essentially managing that creative burn,
Absolutely.
right? And you're knowing when, okay, I got to turn it up a little bit right now, and when you can sort of back off, build up the reserve, and say, okay, let's store it in the batteries for another time, right? Because that's interesting because I know, when I have my developer head on, for example, that's when I'm in the, okay, nothing bother me, period. Because I know
Mhm.
it when I'm working on that, for me, it requires more effort, more focus, and it will take very little to distract me. And as we all know, like especially with like software developers, it takes a while to get back in that zone, right? And to be able to go, oh, that's what I was doing. This is what I was thinking, and go with that flow again. So I do also recommend to people, try and observe those folks that you're around and that you work with, and see if you can identify just from the way they're acting. Are they in that mode? And if they're in that mode, leave them alone, right?
Yeah, and it's
You
fascinating, right? So not everybody realizes that they are managing themselves like that. Sometimes it's a default physiological response to managing focus. Um, I think a fewer percentage of us in this profession are able to articulate, hey, during this time, I'm going to be doing this other thing. I'm going to flip my do not disturb sign on. I'm going to even shut off Slack. Like
yeah,
I'm going to go do my thing. And when I come back online, let's chat and let's have fun. Um,
yeah.
the other thing that I learned early on in my career was how useful open loops were. And this is the idea of, for writing, for example, you
Mm.
always step up or stand up from your desk in the middle of a sentence,
Oh,
right? So you know exactly as soon as you sit back down, you see the sentence, you kind of remember why you did that, you remember the rest of the sentence, and then you can get right back into the flow. There are lots of
oh,
those
that's
kinds of
interesting.
opportunities for coding, for any kind of this creative flow. Like I have a big old whiteboard here on my wall, and there's different kinds of open loops I leave over there so that I can get back into, okay, that's that train of thought. Let's get back in and think about that problem a little bit more. And there's a lot of different ways to manage those open loops, and I think it's a super valuable skill to develop.
I had never thought about it in that way. That is very interesting because as you're describing that, I'm realizing, especially when you said about the whiteboard, I sort of do that to myself without, I guess, never realizing what I was doing, because I'll have a note somewhere, and it sort of ties back to, like we were saying, like that, late at night when the idea comes to you, and I'll just put down half of something. It might
Yeah.
be the half of a title, and I know it's completely unfinished, but I something says put this down so that when you come back later on, it reminds you, not to necessarily complete the thought, but take it somewhere. And now that I think about it, yeah, a lot of the notes that I leave for myself, I should say to folks, I am still one of those people that likes to live in an analog world for note taking and things like that, because it requires more effort, and if it requires more effort, I'm giving it more attention. That's just my theory, but that's what I do, and I have these half written things that I'll just pick up one day and it's like, yeah, today's the day for that one. Now that you mentioned that, I guess I was doing it without realizing it. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, the
that
more
was cheaper than therapy. I'm telling you.
and I like taking notes on the computer. I definitely like taking notes analog as well. There's something different about the tactility of a pen that you really enjoy writing with on paper that is nice, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be sacred, but it needs to be satisfying, right?
Yes.
So and the more satisfying the entire process is, the easier it is for all the ideas to flow, because that satisfaction of using the things eliminates distractions.
Absolutely, and I guess I need to make this confession here. So I feel safe. I guess I should feel safe on my own podcast, but I feel safe with this confession that every time I get, it's time to start a new notebook, I always feel guilty, and I ask myself, am the first thing I'm about to put on the first page is like, is this good enough to go in this nice pristine book? And over time, I've come to laugh at it, and I've realized what I do now. I have to. It's like rip the Band-Aid off. So I'll just make a mess on that first page, and it's like, see, you ruined it. Anything you do now is good. So there's a tip for anybody: if you have that, just destroy the first page, and you get over it really quickly. But
that's hilarious. I do something similar. I skip the first page and I make a mess on the second page.
There you go. See, it is. It's like, okay, you've done the worst you can do here. You've offended the book.
Yep.
Here on out, it's all good stuff, right? So that's funny. I actually feel relieved that I won't be by myself in the asylum when they come to get me. It's like,
you and me too.
You did it too. It's just me and Ivan sitting there ripping pages out of a book, right? But it's funny because a lot of people ask me, like, they're like, but you're a tech guy. Why do you use a written, why do you write things down? And for the exact reasons we just said, right? Mm-hmm. It requires, yes, I can type really fast and I can put a bunch of nonsense on the screen faster than anybody probably. But when I write it, I'm really thinking about it's that commitment to it's permanent, right? There's no delete button. I can scribble it out, but it's still there. And to that gives it a whole other level of importance to me as I'm doing it. So that's my excuse anyway. Yeah,
and it's good. I've really enjoyed exploring how differently the brain responds to different modes of tactility. It's so fascinating, and that's one of my really. I enjoy exploring that aspect of thinking. I enjoy thinking about thinking. It's such a strange idea, but
you've written a couple of books, and I've added them to my list because I was reading through your blog posts and I was like, I feel like I'm only getting a fraction here. I got to dive into these books. The first one, Surviving Software Complexity Techniques for Taming the Beast. Now, first of all, I love the title. Because every time whenever I see like the beast, I'm like, he must be talking about that monolithic code base that he knows I have in the background somewhere. But talk to us about the book.
Yeah, so I enjoy learning and sharpening my own toolkit. And what I've discovered over time is that there are a plethora of books that go miles deep in one tiny area. For example, microservices, or for example, Kubernetes, or for example, insert technology X, right?
Yeah.
But if one person went through all of those books, they might even still end up on the other side without an understanding of how those technologies interrelated, or why you would want to choose one over another. And so I felt like there was a gap And what I wanted to fill was where I was, say, 5 years ago,
Okay.
where I was generally aware of a few of these different technologies, but I wasn't aware enough to be able to do, okay, so that's the characteristic of that problem. Given that I'm aware of this problem set, I'm aware of these potential solutions, I'm going to use technology X because of Y, right?
Okay.
Being able to
Yeah.
make those decisions. And so I wanted to do a small primer on a wide set of technologies rather than going deep in any one area, so that it would give somebody enough conversational familiarity to be able to make a decision about one technology over another.
Very interesting. And that is, that is a difficult topic, right? Because it's hard for us to work that balance sometimes between the part of the brain that says, oh, well, there's this new thing and I want to go use that just because it's shiny and new. And knowing that a tried and tested technology might not be the most exciting thing on the planet, but if it solves the problem, then that's your solution, right?
Right.
And the second book here, Scaling Success: Strategies for Growing Your Tech Teams and Capabilities. Talk to us about that. This might be the one that I read first, just given where I'm at, in my career.
Absolutely. So it's comparing and contrasting somebody who makes all the wrong choices for all the wrong reasons, and
so it's my biography. Is that what you're telling me?
It's a really short read. I think it's 40 or 50 pages, something like that, and I think there's 5 or 6 examples of how to go about things the right way or how to go about things the wrong way, all related to scaling teams and hiring. And it was my first little book that I wanted to explore, and it was a blog post that got way out of control.
It's funny how that happens, right?
That's right.
Okay, so I am conscious of the time here. Is there anything else you want to cover that we haven't dived in? I'm sure there's other things, but anything you want to dive into that we missed?
I don't think that I don't have anything that comes to mind at the moment. I think that the conversation is wonderful. I think you were a wonderfully gracious host, and I definitely appreciate the time.
Oh, no, thank you. Ivan, as I say, when I saw your first blog post, I was like, oh, someone that gets me, and that was the thing when I started sharing with my audience was like, they start, a few folks come back and said, this is great. This guy's got it. And I was like, I know, right? Finally there's someone that gets us. So, thank you for putting this content out there and just, giving folks a way to think about these things that doesn't necessarily come up every day. A lot of the time, I like to focus like these interviews and things like that, talk with folks beyond sort of what I call beyond the obvious, right? There's plenty of folks out there talking about the technical things and the coding things and everything else, but the rest of the experience of doing what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and how that affects us, that's the stuff that interests me the most. So I guess especially as you get older, but thank you. It's more of a case of please explain why I do these things, so thank you for that. And, folks, we will put lots of links in the show notes. Please go check them out. Like I say, Ivan's books are on my Amazon list. So that's going to be a great joy to sit down and read those. So Ivan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with us and give us these perspectives and given, more than anything, something to take away and think about. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.